Chapter 10. Fighting for My Life. Close call to death. I was not so healthy and strong as a child, and even in a part of my adulthood, I grew up having hospitals as my second home. Let me share with you. I learned that my family and friends came to the hospital to say their last farewell. Almost everyone was sure that this was the end for me. I was in the intensive care unit with a breathing tube down my throat and another tube coming out from my neck. I was in a coma connected to various machines. This was not the first close to death call for me. In fact, seems to be that ever since I was born, I was always a step closer to losing my life. Beginning of medical diagnosis. My earliest memory of a hospital was not one of danger. I had a simple surgery to remove an umbilical hernia. But the scenario became very familiar as I kept going back to the hospital repeatedly. I remember not being able to do strenuous efforts or run too much because I would get agitated and unable to breathe. One day, as a small child, I was playing with my dogs. I recall running back to the house and almost passing out. I could not breathe. I was shaking and could not even ask for help. Thank God my mother went out at that moment and saw me lying on the floor. They rushed me to the hospital where they gave me oxygen. They started performing tests and concluded that I was asthmatic. Asthma is an airway inflammation characterized by recurrent, reversible airway obstruction. So from that moment on, I was a slave to various types of inhalers, nasal sprays, and medications. Soon after, we also discovered that I was highly allergic, and not only did exercise or strenuous activities trigger asthma, but also certain strong smells and dust. Therefore, my parents tried their best to adjust my surroundings as much as possible to make it easier for me to cope. I had a dehumidifier, which helped to reduce the feeling of congestion caused by high humidity, and also reduce the growth of microorganisms and mold in my room. The area had to be extremely clear of dust, and if any home repairs were going on, like painting or working with cement, I had to be far from it. We also had a nebulizer machine and asthma medication handy. More diagnosis. After a while, we kind of got used to it and agreed that I just had to be careful of my environment and the type of physical activity I engaged in. Also, I always had to carry my inhalers and sprays with me. That's until one day I got sick with the flu and was given an over-the-counter medication to treat it. This remedy ended up being worse than the ailment itself. After a few minutes of taking the medication, I started itching, having hives, and could not breathe. I had an allergic reaction. Once again, I was rushed to the hospital where I was given antihistamine drugs to counter the effects of the allergy. This event opened a new chapter in my life that involved more tests and visits to the doctor. It was finally said that besides the before mentioned allergies to external components, I was also allergic to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAIDs, aspirin, penicillin, and so many others. I was allergic to almost anything that could reduce pain and inflammation. A little respite. For years, I was in and out of hospitals for asthma and allergies-related problems. Then one day we visited a different doctor. He really took an interest in my case, and in a few months I started noticing fewer asthma attacks, and allergies did not seem to bother me much anymore. I found relief and thought that, from that point, things could only get better. Delayed puberty. As I got close to puberty, a fresh set of problems appeared. The hot topic in school for the girls was whose body was changing the fastest. I saw my friends becoming beautiful young ladies, and in my case, someone forgot to send my body the memo. I kept growing taller, but that's about it. None of the other normal processes applied to me. As time passed, my parents also noticed this and took me for a checkup. The doctor suggested giving my body time to adjust, as some girls do mature slower than others do. Believe me, mine took a lot of time. When I finally started my process, it did not go as smoothly as I thought. There was nothing normal, regular, or fun about it. My period was so disorganized. Sometimes it will come twice in a month, and after it won't come back again till maybe 3 or 6 months later. Oh, but when it came, it could last up to 2 weeks. Besides, it was very painful. Noticing this abnormal development, I was once again taken to the doctor. After a couple of tests, they found I had endometriosis, a condition where tissue similar to the lining of the wound starts to grow in other places, like the ovaries and fallopian tubes, and polycystic ovaries, a condition in which the ovaries produce an abnormal amount of androgens that are usually present in women in small amounts. These conditions surely affected my life negatively in the following years. I had at least 5 laparoscopic surgeries for endometriosis, which later on played an important role in my inability to get pregnant. This meant a new set of medications, treatments, and cares.